Hi, everybody. I'm Chelsea, and I would like to welcome you today to our Pulse of Pasco interview. Today's topic is Act Now or Lose It All. Your vote, your property, your future. And they say it's illegal to question it. Now, you might wonder what all this means, but we have Kris Jurski with us today to tell us a little bit about what he's talking about. For those of you who are new to joining us, let's take a few minutes to introduce who we are so that you know who you're dealing with.
So hi, everybody. I'm Erin Pike, and I also am a Pasco resident, a mom, a grandma, and a business owner. And I'm very involved in Florida politics, local politics, as well as national politics. My passion is researching data, digging into the data, breaking it into a manageable understanding of what that means to you. And then more importantly, what can we do as constituents? But the most important is how do we do it? Because that's the piece that we find that's missing. So that's what our goal is to do on each one of these calls. Rebecca?
Hi, my name is Rebecca Yingling. I'm also a Pasco resident. And I got involved with these ladies years ago, back in 2021, at a school board meeting, which Erin invited me to. And I met Chelsea. And since then, I worked in private, I was vice president of operations for a large security and private investigation firm here in Florida. I've since retired. I'm home with my two children and my amazing husband. My passion is really following the money and seeing where people's loyalties really reside, because what I've seemed to find is, a lot of legislation and a lot of, shall we say, tax money goes to special interests. And I think that knowledge is power. And we as a community need to hold our local elected officials accountable and following the money and getting the community engaged.
My name is Chelsea Starr, and my background is in media and marketing and communications. That's what I've done for the past 30 years. Anything having to do with art, media, communications, that is my wheelhouse. And I love to be able to talk to people and educate them in any way that I can. Education is also another huge thing that I'm super interested in, which is why I'm so excited to have Kris with us today, because he has such a breadth of knowledge that I know you all are going to want to hear and learn about. He's going to tell us today about two very important bills. The first one is HB 1381, and the second one is SB 1414. So, hey, Kris, give us a quick introduction of who you are, please.
Well, my name is Kris Jurski. I've developed a system called the People's Audit that really worked with the grassroots in Florida for the last 4 years. Probably the biggest thing that we're all able to accomplish, because it really is a group effort, a crowd with multiple coalitions coming together. We were able to clean 1.2 million bad or invalid registrations off the voter rolls in Florida, and also worked tirelessly. I haven't write the laws. A lot of great people behind the scenes have, but we've worked tirelessly to get legislation changed in Florida to also help clean the voter rolls and keep them clean. The biggest thing is we're keep on fighting is against the machines. And a lot of the stuff that we added this year in this year's legislation cycle was actually kind of exciting at first, because we got all of our bills in place, sponsored and out there. And then these bills came along that I'd like to tell you more about, basically. But if you have any more questions on that.
I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the Red Belly Road issue. It was happened where a bunch of people were just registered to vote on a street that didn't exist called Red Belly Road. And then the street disappeared. And then all of a sudden there were all these voters and nobody knew anything about.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the things that made me build the software the way I did, because essentially we were just looking at vote by mail in 2022 for the primary, and this road jumped out at me. I had a pile of errors that I had to go through, and this road was local to my community in Claremont, and it was called Red Belly Road. Never heard of it. Looked it up in Zillow, doesn't exist. Looked it up in Google, doesn't exist. And then a whole street was basically full of these people. And we didn't know if we found like the first phantoms that everybody's talking about all the time. But the weirdest thing is as we're investigating this, the newest update came for the mail-in ballots, and everybody's address got switched back. So if you follow the timeline, what happened is these people were originally on 12th Street. They had their address broken to Red Belly Road. Mail-in ballots were requested to that broken address and shown as delivered. That's the most important key point out of this. And then they got switched back to 12th Street, We went out and interviewed everybody on that street the weekend after the election. No one knew what we were talking about. Nobody asked for a mail-in ballot. No one asked for their street address to update. And they were completely clueless. And then at the end of the street, one of the ladies did have her voter information card. She was the only one on the street that had the card delivered. It's kind of a weird God thing. We're there asking her to go get it, and the mail carrier walks up. She pulls the card out. Lo and behold, it has Red Belly Road printed on it. And the mail carrier is there saying that, yeah, she's the only one on the street I knew for 20 years, so I delivered it. So the key is we actually captured a picture of that voter ID with the printed Red Belly Road on it as proof. Like it wasn't just something I made up in a spreadsheet. And that was the first time we caught the voter rolls being changed behind our backs. Like we're all used to just looking over the final election results. We didn't know that stuff was changing, and that's essentially identity theft. Like people were getting their identities theft stolen and voted without them even knowing. Kind of changed the whole game.
What is the accountability to the Secretary of Elections or to your local folks that are over, the responsibility for those voter rolls? Like, who are they held accountable to other than we?
Well, that's the reason I got that sign right there, because Alan Hayes is my SEO. He took $195,000 in Zucker bucks for the 2020 election. He kind of fell on the sword on that for the Red Belly Road, and he made multiple excuses, but they don't stand up, because essentially the first thing he said is that he made those changes to Red Belly Road and that it was an update from the 911 system. Well, we called 911. 911 never heard of that street. Basically, it doesn't exist in Claremont. And then the second thing is why was he making those edits in June? You're not supposed to be editing the voter rolls in June. There's a blackout period that you're not allowed to touch the voter rolls from the end of May all the way through to November, really. So, I mean, something's really weird about that story, that he figured out that he made the mistake. If he made the mistake and he left it there through the election, it's one thing. That's maybe explainable, but he made the mistake and he corrected it right 2 days before the election results came out. Like that doesn't add up. So his story doesn't hold up. And I mean, Cord Bird actually stood up and said, yeah, that's essentially what happened. Alan Hayes said that that's what it was, and that's what it was. We had police reports. We had election crime complaints filed. All of it was ignored. They never even acknowledged that I sent in the complaints. Normally you would get like a receipt that says, okay, we're in possession. Here's your case number. When I called the AG department, they freaked out. They were like, what are you doing? You can't talk to us. You have to talk through law enforcement. And it's like, okay, I'm just a citizen trying to report something that might be a crime. I need it investigated. Nobody wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, that's what we find a lot is nobody will take responsibility or accountability. Yeah. It's like you don't know who is the person that is going to hold them to account. Nobody will do it. We've had that in our own county. We brought it to the AG, and the AG is like, well, you got to go back to your issues with the superintendent. You got to go back to superintendent.
Yeah. Finger pointing.
Like, how are you supposed to manage through that?
We found something recently, but I won't go into that bombshell. It literally just came up within the last 2 days about property taxes that I can talk about at the end. That might shed some light on this.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you actually knew about that. I forgot it was in Claremont. I think actually I watched your video, so I knew about it. Anyway, I'm glad you know, because when I heard that whole story, my head was like it was mind blowing. I had no idea that was actually going on. And I mean, I'd heard other stories like that in other states, but it was just crazy to hear that here. So, well, let's get on to what we're actually talking about. It has to do with that. But the bills we want to talk about today are HB 1381 and SB 1414. So I need you, Kris, to break it down like I'm a 6-year-old and tell me why these matter and what I need to know about them.
Who sponsored and co-sponsored these bills, Kris?
Oh, that's a good question. The SB 1414 is by Senator Ingoglia. He was essentially picked by Cord Bird and the governor specifically for that bill. You caught me, though. I don't have my notes on HB 1381. If I understand this correctly, the Senate is really driving this whole thing, and they just asked for this mirror bill in the House to come along. I have to find out who's sponsoring HB 1381.
Well, and it's more helpful to have a companion bill when you're driving it through committees. Is
Yeah,
that
you
correct?
have to. Essentially, any legislation that's going to be passed, this is some of the very complicated, like how the sausage is made in Tallahassee. You have to have a bill basically in both houses that are agreed to and reconciled that they match ultimately to come to the floor to be voted on, and then they go to the governor. So the thing that was weird about this particular session, I think we had about 5 pieces of legislation, including a single day hand counted ballot election bill that we submitted. That one didn't get sponsored. Nobody would touch that, but we had it put in drafting for the first time. So it was in the record and it was there if they wanted to pick it up. But this was the first year we had all of our bills basically picked up by various senators and basically both Senate and House. Last year it was just House. And then all of a sudden this bill came out of nowhere and they were like, well, this is the one Cord Bird wants. So, and the governor. So that's essentially like they were going to ignore the grassroots and just pick this one up.
Okay, if you could go back to what Chelsea had asked you, like just break
Yeah.
it down just for, the folks that are going to be hearing this to understand what it really means to them.
Elections are really complicated and they love to point to both the federal government and the state government. But if you want to think about how we as average citizens in Pasco, do they have the touch machines or do they have the scanners where you vote on paper?
Scanners.
Scanners. Okay. So most people in Florida vote on a piece of paper. The problem is they don't count paper. They count digital ballots. And what this bill will do is move us closer to the nightmare that Georgia and Arizona are currently in, where they never go back to consult with the paper. Once those ballots are scanned, everything will be moved into a digital artifact, and those digital artifacts will be what is going to be used to prove what the election results are. No matter how much you want to complain, no matter how much you want to point and say, I want that paper, can we reconcile the paper? Essentially, this bill will make that illegal. Like they will completely flip us over to a completely digital election, even though Ingoglia keeps on talking about how we vote on paper. Very, very, very sneaky play on words. We vote on paper. But yeah, but did you count paper? That's what we're asking. And that's where he shuts up really quick. But I mean, the thing is that that's the little twist that we will be essentially like Georgia and Arizona. And if you saw what happened in Georgia specifically with those like people scanning over and over and over again, well, they had people that spent their own time and money building software, giving up days and weeks to basically find that analysis. And they literally found all those duplicates and found all those basically manipulated digital ballots. And the state was like, well, the law says that that's the election. Those are the election results. And that's essentially why Georgia right now is crying to be much like Florida is today. And they have programs out there called Paper Please, because they want to go to something like what we have. And it just mind-boggling that the Secretary of State and the governor, especially with the outcry from Trump, Elon, all the people in the United States saying, hey, we want paper ballots, they want to move us as quickly as possible into a digital format.
I actually have been writing Cord Bird and our local SOS, Brian Corley, all the time, asking him about these issues. And even our senators, and what they have told me is, oh, you don't need to worry about it because everything is on paper. You don't need to worry about it. It's very cagey with how they do it. But that's not the issue. I mean, they don't talk about the machines. They wouldn't answer any of my other questions. And I was very concerned about all of that. I mean, but with this, the paper goes away and nobody cares.
You got to watch what politicians do versus what they say. So there was a case with Tim Canova. I don't know if you're familiar with that, in Debbie Wasserman Schultz in 2016. Did you hear about that story? It's a very, I mean, this is a Democrat in a Republican state. That's what makes this so worrisome. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is basically Clinton's best friend. She ran against a law professor, Democrat in Broward, and he was beating her on every metric. The only thing he lost on was mail-in ballots, surprisingly enough. And this was back in 2016 for the primary. He sued and said, I want to see the paper ballots to count and reconcile the count that I see on the screen here. And again, this way back in 2016, I think Governor Scott was still governor at the time. Brenda Snipes was the supervisor of elections there. She kind of drug her feet for about 2 years. They sued and sued and sued. And then finally, she admitted under oath that she destroyed the ballots. And if you catch her in an interview that I put on my Substack, she clearly says, she's passed away since then, but she clearly says, she's like, we scanned it all. I don't know why we have to keep the paper. The digital is the same thing. So here you are, a digital, a Democratic supervisor of election breaking state and federal law, because you're supposed to keep all that paper and you're supposed to reconcile the paper against what the count was. That's essentially common sense, you would think, because they keep on telling us that the paper ballot is even Cord Bird says it, that's the intent of the voter. So you would think common sense. We just want to reconcile the paper against this. If you go to any bank teller, he'll put the money in the machine will count it, and then they'll count it out by hand right in front of you, so you know exactly how much money you got. For some strange reason, a Democrat supervisor election destroyed 50,000 ballots. She resigned in disgrace, and this was right around the time DeSantis won he came in as the first time governor. She got reinstituted by DeSantis. DeSantis removed her suspension that Governor Scott put on, and she was able to retire with a massive pension. Okay. This is a situation that she could have had the book thrown at her, and she could have been made an example in front of all the other supervisor of elections. You will not destroy paper ballots. You will basically, when a race is contested, you will show what happened in that election. Essentially, Tim Canova won in court. He was able to get his money back for his legal fees. The state had to pay back his legal fees because the judge agreed that she broke the law. But DeSantis, for some reason, let her off the hook, and not only let her off the hook, gave her a pension. So, I mean, that's one of those situations where you're talking about basically walk the walk versus talk the talk. DeSantis talks a lot about how we're doing election integrity and everything in the state. Have you guys witnessed anything that's changed other than cleaning the voter rolls? We have exactly the same system. And the thing about cleaning the voter rolls is 3-4 months, it's right back to the mess it was before, because nothing has changed.
But
So,
the SOEs deny, like our supervisor of election, Brian Corley, I've had several conversations with him. He says everything's fine with our elections. And then I had asked after our primary last year for 2024, I'd asked to do a recount of a certain election. And he told me like nobody ever asked that. And that would just cost like a lot of money. I said, well, how much money? He said, well, nobody's ever asked this before. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And I'm like, I don't, I'm like, well, just give me a guess. And he's like, well, I have to pay. He's like, oh, you're looking at like tens of thousands of dollars. And I'm like, where's the transparency? Because, there's an exorbitant amount of undervotes or overvotes. And, the numbers didn't statistically add up to the years before. And he just, his excuse is 1 and 1 didn't make 2. I'm a logic, common sense person, but they're just all in denial, right? That there's anything wrong.
The most common sense, any normal citizen would think that, okay, you're counting these on a digital format, you're running them through a scanner and you're counting them. But just common sense would say, hey, can we grab a stack of those papers and count them by hand and see if it matches what's in the machine? Any normal person would think that's what the supervisor of elections are doing. The way they're crafting the law, this is essentially see no evil, hear no evil. They will put it in a format that the only thing the supervisor election is allowed to look at is the digital record. When it prints out and it says who the winner is, that's it. They are the one thing that SB 14 does, which is absolutely critical to understand, is at the end of the bill, there's this thing called the post-election audit. As of today, the new MAGA candidates that we just got into the state of Florida, because a couple of them did win locally, okay, with that provision, they would be able to go back and look at everything that happened after an election. It's called a post-certification audit. They're allowed to check the machines, they're allowed to check the ballots, everything. So up to this moment, we've always pulled them and said, hey, well, that provision's there. But the point is it's their discretion. So if the supervisor election, just like you just demonstrated, does not want to go and look at that, there's no law that forces them to go look at it. A lawsuit maybe, but they'll just drag that out like you saw with Brenda Snipes. When they changed SB 14, they literally get rid of that provision completely. They replace it with a digital audit, or I think it's called a digital validation, where they just used another election vendor. So now we're going to have 2, We're going to have to buy another election vendor in every county. Nobody touches anything. That all scans. And both election vendors are like, hey, you got what I got? Yeah, I got what you got. And that's it. That's the end of the election. And the funny thing is they both communicate with one another before. This is kind of like basically whispering in each other's ear before the test. They know the answers before the test. And I'm sure that every supervisor election says that's impossible. But I mean, anybody with some common sense would know that they're taking a USB stick from one machine and they're putting it in the other because they have to transfer the ballot images and all of the technicals that deal with the paper to read the ballot in the other machine. So anybody with common sense would know that, hey, you can pass the number over to that other machine on this USB stick or Bluetooth, whatever. They can just basically communicate with one another and they know what the results are going to be. So
they no longer
it's
have to
complete
keep
kabuki theater at that moment where we're watching two election vendors take all of our taxpayer money away, two private vendors that we're never allowed to examine. And these private third-party NGOs are essentially telling us who won our elections. And we're never allowed to touch the paper again. The paper will be boxed up and it will be illegal to touch the paper. Because essentially, once this law changes, the supervisor election won't even be able to look at it because the post-election audit will be over. They'll take that completely away. It's already running in Leon County and Palm Beach. That's the way they run their elections. But that, again, it goes down to the discretion of the supervisor elections. So Wendy Link over there is like, hey, well, I got clear ballot. I'm not touching the paper anymore.
Brian Corley was very much the same way. When I contacted him, I was asking him about a particular school board election because I knew that this guy had won, and I asked to look at the paper ballots and for him to look at the paper ballots. He was like, "No, we can't do that. It's not a thing." And it just we don't have control over that. Brian Corley was telling me how we doesn't have any control over anything. And I said, "Well, let us look at the counting of the ballots." And he was like, "No, we can't do that. I don't have any say in that. There's no issue, and you have to refer everything to Cord Bird," which I did, and it didn't help anything. And when Cord Bird had been talking to other people and he was given, direct questions, he had very similar answers about, oh, well, it's just the paper ballots. And so we had a big question with our past school board superintendent, Kurt Browning, who used to be the state SOS, and then he was this county SOS, because I was looking at the different counts from his elections, and it was like one was 400, he won by 485, and then he won by 483, and then he won by 485, and it was like, wait, how do you have all these elections where you only have like 3 or 4 vote discrepancy? It was insane. I mean, that's like statistically impossible.
Every primary, every election.
At the end of the day, this is like what Stalin used to say: I don't care who votes, it's a matter of who counts the votes. That's
Right,
all
exactly.
this is. This is essentially 100% control on tabulation of the votes. And it is illegal for citizens, because I had Cord Bird up there. I think it was December of 2023. We were at Tallahassee and he was doing a testimony, and Faberico, the chair, asked him the question: do the supervisor elections have the discretion to just count the ballots, to just check the machines, basically? And he says the law forbids it. We have electromechanical count. And it's like, the question is to check the machines, not to tabulate the entire election, just to check the machines. No, it's forbidden. They will not count. They're not allowed to count hand count ballots. So, I mean, like I said, common sense would tell you that somebody that's running an election wants to know the machine's not cheating. They literally have constructed all of the legalities that even the supervisor of elections are in a noose. So your local supervisor election is really basically being held hostage by the state, by these new laws. And I mean, if you don't believe me, look what they did to Tina Peters. Tina Peters is a Gold Star mom sitting in prison now. Probably, I mean, every day we're praying that she doesn't get killed in there, because it's either being moved back and forth between strip search. She's a 70-year-old grandma, and she's being strip searched and thrown in solitary confinement for every little thing that they can find. And they're purposely holding her up on a pedestal, say, go ahead, touch those ballots, and that's where you're going to be. Because essentially, she did the digital version of that. She just looked under the hood in the Dominion machine and just wanted to make sure that people's votes weren't messed with. That's all. And she was literally thrown in jail for that. So that is being held up as a standard for all supervisor of elections across the United States. They all have a gun to their head, and this is all being perpetrated by the state. I don't know how else to sugarcoat it because, but I mean, when I saw this law come down, again, it was so subtle because they use these like little legal maneuvers that they just change something here, they change something here. But at the end of the day, the general theme is they want to put it in a situation where they can fabricate whatever they need to do for the vote and no questions asked. That is the official result, period. You have no way of even proving that it's not because you're never allowed to see the evidence.
And are they
So it's just,
required now? Are the SOEs required now to even keep the paper ballots?
that's what will be the magic question because when Clear Ballot comes on, one of their services is it's oh we're they even Cord Bird bragged about it. He's like, oh, you can go online and see whatever happened in the election and count to your heart's content, and that's essentially what the goal is that
Right.
ultimately everything will be scanned in, it will be digitized. They'll make sure that the digital record looks what it's supposed to look, and then the paper will be basically boxed up, shredded, burned, whatever.
Hey, Kris, quick question. Today, the way the law stands today, what is the records retention policy, if you know it, for those ballots? Like how long do those need to be held? And what is the law today?
I don't know it quote, but I know the federal one that we dealt with for 2020, I believe was 22 months. And that was the same thing. None of us, we were fighting for nearly a year and a half. None of us in the entire state got to see a 2020 ballot. They refused to even open up anything to give us access to just check those ballots. Nobody.
So
So
we
again,
have to hold on to our records as citizens for 7 years, right?
yeah, I mean, but the point is that, like I said, once they do this legal shell game, that law will change. And really, it doesn't matter because it's one of those things you have to catch them in a crime somehow. And even when you do catch them in a crime, it doesn't matter because, like, I just got done proving that they let 500,000 or yeah, 500,000 people got a mail-in ballot the last 2024 election in November without giving an ID. And I submitted that to them, and they're like, whatever. Like they didn't even want to investigate it. They just made up some excuse. They're like, oh, that's because they were grandfathered in. I was like, no, 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 no. I know exactly. These people came in and in fact, it was, I think Pinellas and Miami in 2 days, two counties got 90% of those ballots. And they were all in like August
Oh,
of
yes.
this year. So it's like, I get what you're trying to say about the grandfather stuff, but these were this year that they just had these and they had no ID. They just got mail in ballots and they voted. So the law clearly states that they must record if it's if we changed it. That was one of the grassroots changes that if they were missing their ID in the system, the supervisor election had to record it and mark which way that they got the ballot. Supposedly, I guess they took calls over the phone and just gave people ballots, or that's what we're being told, but who knows? I mean, that was a hell of
Where's
a lot
the
of phone calls because I think Pinellas itself took about 300,000 requests in a single day. Man,
Yep.
I don't know how many people they had working the phones that day. That's a
So
hell of a lot of requests. People were typing
there's no
fast too.
there's no transparency. There's no way to go back and verify votes. What this legislation is proposing is to say everything's just going to go digital to put it
Yeah,
to, a third grade level for people to understand. They're saying you can't go back and defer to paper ballots to verify. It's
yeah,
all going into machines from a private for-profit companies, correct?
exactly.
And it's going into these machines and we give the results and you can't go back and question the paper ballots. This is
Yeah,
the
just think
bill
of McDonald's
that
running your
belay.
elections because that's essentially what this is. This is a third party NGO, a private corporation. You don't even know who their board is. You don't even know who the company who works in the company. It's essentially just a third party organization that you as a citizen have to trust that is going to tell you who won your elections. And I mean, the other thing is that one little subtle detail that point I just made about the 500,000 people with no ID, they didn't like that. So they happened to change one little piece of the law. Again, just move one word around. They moved the reporting section into reporting systems. Long story short, that will be illegal for me to access. So again, where's the transparency? They are literally shutting down all of our abilities as citizens to do oversight on the elections and see if the elections were valid. The stuff that we're finding now, they're completely ignoring. Okay. And then they're just going to further make it more secure where they have complete control on everything. And the only thing you're going to see is the final result. And that's it. And
So
that
it's a
they're going to tell
marker
you,
system.
sorry, the law says that's the final result. Go sue me.
And
So-
no transparency. You
No
can't ask, or
transparency.
it's against the law for them to
Yeah.
have transparent. And we're in a Republican state, correct?
The free state of Florida, as they say.
Yeah.
Hey, Kris, do we have any champions at the state legislation? Any that you know?
I mean, we were told flat out, don't even think about mentioning single day hand count ballots. That's never going to fly. I mean, Golgia himself, I sat in his office and the first thing he said to me was like, if we do hand count ballots, and Broward would cheat. And I'm like, man, you got trust issues. I would trust the citizens counting this stuff before I trust the third party vendor. I was like, the citizens are the people. And I told another guy here recently, the only way what I think they're missing, and I don't know if they really care anymore, but what they're missing is people don't trust the elections anymore. Okay. It's not the machines. It's not the efficiency of the elections. It's not like we're arguing about the process and procedures. We don't trust what you're doing. And the only way we're going to trust it is if people are allowed to participate again. And that's what the whole point of hand count ballot. They don't get that. The point of you as neighbors, as I go through the data and I look at stuff, I can say, oh, well, okay, at least I know that's legit because I've checked it. Okay. I know that that's legit because I've done reconciliations and everything else. The only way I can trust the particular thing of being done is if I know and I've cross-checked it. It's like going to your accountant and he tells you that you owe $10,000 for your taxes this year. And you ask them, well, can you show me how you got that number? And they're like, no, just pay the bill. That's literally what we're being told.
Well, and you can't ask and it'll be illegal if you do ask.
Yeah.
I also wanted to make people aware that when you go to get your driver's license, the places that run the DMVs are actually outside agencies. They're not state-run agencies, they're NGOs. So just if you didn't know that, you might want to be aware. It's pretty crazy. And then they sell our data.
It's a big, massive hole. That probably leads me to the next point. I don't know if there's any further questions before we diverge. This one is a bombshell, but is there any other questions on the bill itself?
My question would be, what can I do as one citizen to make sure that this thing doesn't go through?
Call your local reps. So it has worked in the past as citizens have called their local supervisor of elections, your local representative and your local senator. You typically can find, and also the county commissioners, because I don't think the county commissioners and the supervisor of elections even know what's happening. This again was a very subtle change. Yeah, it's kind of a Trojan horse because when you look at the little piece of paper that thumbnail that Ingolgia released, you're like, wow, they're going to do a couple good things. And yeah, there is like maybe a handful of things that they do, but we're also doing it on our bills too. Our grassroots bill asks for the same thing. It's just that in our grassroots bill, we ask for more reconciliations, the ability to do these hand counts. And the thing is it's optional. Like it's like if the county wants to do it, it can. That's all. That's all we're asking. We're not trying to mandate hand counts for everybody in the whole state. We're just saying that the supervisor elections have the authority to check the machines. That's it. It's common sense. They won't let us do it. But the biggest thing is the local pressure specifically, and I should say pressure, but local contact and relationships will make a far bigger impact because if your supervisor of election calls that rep and says, excuse me, what do you guys think you're doing? They're going to listen to the supervisor of election much faster than they will the citizens. And I don't think they realize what's coming because if you go to Georgia and you go to Arizona, those local counties have been inundated by lawsuits because this is clearly against the law. If it's not unconstitutional, it breaks like every ethical moral fiber that you could possibly think of. Any common sense thing would be approaching this. Is just like now they're getting inundated with lawsuits saying, well, we need to see that data. And before when that data was supposedly open per the sunshine laws, now they're going to have to basically pay for lawyers and litigation and get tied up in courts. And that's going to cost money at the local level. And that's something that I think that they're like, oh, no, we're just going to buy the machines for every county because that's another cost. The vendor is going to have to be paid for. So essentially every single county is going to be mandated to have this clear ballot system installed.
So just to recap, in order to make sure that your voice is heard, you can call up your either Board of County Commissioners or your local senator, your local congressperson, and call them, because that's the most important, the most effective way. And then tell them that you disagree with these bills, that you disagree with HB 1381 and SB 1414. Is that what we do?
You can too, but again, I get the sinking feeling that they just don't care. It doesn't hurt to make everybody aware of what's going on, but I think that the calls that matter will be your local county commissioners and supervisor of elections, your local representative, and your local senator. And
I
those would
believe
be the ones that make a difference.
Blaze and Goli represents part of Pasco, our county.
Yeah, parts of it, yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's almost to the point where I believe that they basically picked him because he's going to be kind of like a linebacker and just push this through. Some of the other legislators might get weak-kneed when all of the citizens start calling in. This one's kind of weird this year because, like I said earlier, we had all these bills on the table. They were all sponsored by both representatives and senators, and we thought great. And then this bill just came out of nowhere, and they're telling us, well, that's what the governor wants. And it's like, yeah, well,
And I
that's
believe
nice. The people
Jake
want
Collins,
this.
Jake Collins in Hillsborough co-sponsored this with Blaze and Golia.
I'm not sure. Maybe
That's what I heard
the
too.
legislation piece of it, I've really been leaning on folks like Defend Florida and some of their volunteers. If it wasn't for them pointing some of this stuff out, I wouldn't even have known, because again, I read the bill the first time and it didn't even jump out at me.
So Kris,
Right.
before we move on to the next bombshell you want to share with us, where is this bill currently?
It's getting pushed through committees like its normal track. This has been an unusual year. I don't know if it's because of the pushback that we've been putting out there now, but normally this time of year, they're already launching legislation to the floor. A lot of this stuff is not even started through committees yet. They're actually kind of slow and behind and have a backlog of a number of bills. And I haven't seen anything really get out there and get voted on other than that legislation for the immigration bill that was at the beginning, that special session. We're watching it, and that's one of the nice things about our websites. If you go to the Florida House or the Senate bill and you do a search at the very top for the bill like SB 1414, there's a little highlight that says watch this bill or track this bill. That's actually a great thing to sign up for, because it will literally send you an email every time something touches that bill, like if it moves to another committee or something's changed on it. So it's a good way of keeping track of what's going on. The other thing is just watch people like myself and Defend Florida. They're sending out alerts when something changes because there's a bunch of grassroots people watching.
How powerful is it to write a letter? Like, I know that they say certain emails like equal so many people, or so many phone calls equal so many people. What's the most important thing?
A phone call really matters because typically you'll hear from their legislative aide that's in the office, or the district person, and they do log all of the phone calls, who called and what was the topic. So there's a log of phone calls that really basically makes an impact. We know that, like from the experiences we had before, they usually say the phone calls is what inundates them, and they basically back off, or they support it if we're trying to support the bill. Actually, funny thing is Twitter has been making a big impact too, where you start sharing on social media, even Facebook, I've heard, where there's a lot of groups that get together and make phone calls. That also makes an impact because the aides are also on social media and they're watching, and those things light up. Like every time you tag somebody, which tag is you actually put their Twitter handle in the actual post, and they'll actually get a notice of saying someone mentioned you in their tag. So we've been mentioning Ingoglia and some of the other key committee people in our post, the governor, things like that.
Hey, Kris, is it worthwhile to reach out to the committee members?
Yes, it is. That gets more advanced if you have more time than the critical people, than the Senate leadership, the House leadership, and the committee people. But the thing about the committee people is you got to be careful to watch the calendar. Those committee people deal with so much legislation. The key time to really talk to those committee people is like the day of, like the morning of, when they're about to walk into that committee meeting, or the night before. Those are really the timed points. If you're making general calls to your legislators at any given time, they're recording that and they're taking a mental note. But the committee people are really just like, okay, what's on the agenda today? And when you hit them right when they're walking in for that meeting, that's really the best time to make them aware of how you feel about a particular piece of legislation.
And where do you see their meeting schedule? So like
that's again that bill tracker that I mentioned before. If you follow the bill tracker, you will typically get an alert, and it's one of the things that is just the nature of the beast. We don't get a lot of head start. Like there was a bill that they tried to hit us all with felonies for harassments of a supervisor election. That came out like on a Thursday at 9 o'clock or 5 o'clock. We were aware that the next morning they were going into committee. So sometimes you have less than 24 hours. So that's why I say start out by calling your locals and making sure they're aware, because that's more of a friendly call. They're usually on a first name basis with each other, and they'll call and say, look, I'm getting a lot of feedback. This is not good. We got to do something about this, either change it or kill it. Those are the things that make a difference. But as far as like calling them directly, the committee, that has to be timed.
You want to go ahead and delve into the bombshell you were talking about?
Well, yeah, let's see. How can we introduce this? Because this is relatively new information. With election integrity has been kind of like a murder mystery. If you guys have watched those shows in the past, like Mystery Solved and things like that, if you've watched those, typically three things get basically established. You have the means, how they did it, and then there's the opportunity, and then there's the motive. The motive is really the key thing. And the one thing that bugged me when we just went through the 2024 election is when I was watching all those down ballot races, it was like building in my head. If you want to use the same analogy, like 2020 happened, it was kind of like a missing person. And we were like, what just happened here? We went and investigated with the little bit of digital data that we had from that 2020 election, and we found a body. And we're like, well, who did it? And that's where this all started. And then the next election happened, another body comes up, and we're like, we got a serial killer on our hands. So everybody's sitting there and everybody's got theories. Everybody's got a list of subjects. People have said, is it China hacking us? Or the vendors basically just stealing the elections, and the supervisor elections don't know anything? Are the supervisor elections in on it? Is the state in on it? There's all these theories, right? But what happens when you establish motive is usually it's like, whoa, this just jumps out. It's the butler with the candlestick in the living room, because he has all three of those things. So recently we heard this guy in Texas that he was laying out a case with property taxes in Texas. And he explained this scenario where he's a builder, he comes in and they're trying to hike up his property taxes, something a lot of us are dealing with, and especially in Florida with insurance and all this other stuff. But the thing that was very odd is he's a businessman, and he came in there with all his documentation ready to show like, what's the valuation of this? And the property appraiser is acting kind of like a used car salesman and saying, hold on a second, let me go in the back and see if I can get that approved. And it's just like, this doesn't make sense. There's laws for this. There's math. Like, why is this happening? Long story short, he sued them, and he discovered when they admitted under oath that they pulled 60,000 properties out of Denton, Texas, and put them in a spreadsheet and just figured out how much money they needed to raise and just applied it to those houses. So that is like completely breaking the law. Okay. And Texas has a lot worse than us, but it's very similar. We have an increasing problem in Florida with property taxes. The reason that they were doing this, the reason they were manipulating the property tax rolls, is because the school boards were essentially over leveraged, meaning they borrowed too much money. So essentially they were saying something like they collateralized everybody's house because they went to the banks and said, hey, look, we got all these people. They're captive prisoners. If they don't pay the property tax, we take their house from them. So of course they're going to get loans. A normal person would maybe borrow 20% of what they needed. No, they borrowed 20 times what they needed. So for every dollar of taxpayer money they had, they borrowed 20. They put that all into bonds, and they leveraged it to the hilt. So when I sat back and I heard that, and I saw that it was connected to the school board, and the guy is explaining how the school boards are refusing to give Ken Paxton all the financials to be audited, I'm like, well, I don't think we're worried about gay kids in school anymore, or what bathrooms we need to do. That's all a diversion. We need to start asking the schools, show us your damn financial sheets, because we got issues here. And the thing is that if they don't show us these financials, that is even further proof that they need to essentially keep this under wraps. Like I believe now, after seeing what I've seen, they are purposely controlling the elections because any normal human being, like a normal citizen, especially a MAGA person, would come in and look down at the paperwork and go, what the hell? And just freak out because they would see all the financial fraud that's going on. They only can let people in to these school board races, property tax appraisal, legislators, governors that are on board to conceal this away from the people. That's the only way that they could basically do this. So again, going back to the murder mystery, that's your motive. Your motive is they want to cover up for all the financial fraud that they've done that by leveraging everybody's property taxes to the hilt. And what they hoped to do, if you wanted to follow this forward, they're most likely going to blow this all up because this goes back to that you'll own nothing and be happy situation where I was thinking they were going to do this to the stock market. But now everybody's house will be in hell because you'll get bills that be like, what's this? And my property taxes have gone up 300, 500%. And you'll be in a situation where it's like, well, if you don't like it, move. And you will literally lose your house and it will be forced like the Depression. Like if you go back to the 20s and you see all those farmers, it always bugged me because I sat back and thought to myself, I was like, how did farmers lose their houses during the Depression if there was no property taxes? Like it always bugged me. Like who repossessed these farms? They were they were passing these things to their kids for generations. And all of a sudden in 1920, they lost their farm. Like it didn't make any sense to me. But this is essentially a hijack. This is the government colluding with the banks to steal people's property. I don't know how else to sugarcoat it. But again, this is the motive. Like this is essentially why they're rigging elections.
So Texas doesn't have what we have in Florida, which is the 3% of your property value, right? Right. So or assessed value.
But the point is that law says you can't increase. Okay. The reason I keep in on this, and it was just almost fate. I'm sitting there, what was it, Saturday night, talking to my neighbor, and she's talking about how her dad wanted to buy a house because he was downsizing and he was looking at a house maybe 10 minutes away from my house. And she said that they had to back out of the real estate deal because the taxes were $16,000 a year. And I'm like, what? That's Jersey rates. I was like, that's one of the reasons I ran from New Jersey. They're doing it to new houses. They're super inflating the new house fees because I mean, like literally our houses have gone up double, like, but that's within the last 5 years. We're all like, yay, we're making money. But we don't realize that that's also affecting the assessed values of all these houses being sold.
Well, what they're doing, what they did in our county is they did it through impact fees, and our school district did that, and they convinced the voters to tax themselves, and they used the teachers not being paid enough money. They did a huge propaganda, and we fought against it hard. And
well, the thing is some counties will be better than others. But when I was looking into this, it's like, what is it? Miami, Broward, Orange County, Hillsborough. Those are the big ones. Palm Beach, I think, is in there too. They're leveraged to the hilt. And it's just like when that happens, the way that it works, we would think that our counties are all in the same district. But what's really happening is the state is moving money around because, again, this is all based. They know this. They know this. That's why they're rigging the elections. They're moving money around to try and keep everything balanced for now and hope that we're going to get through. And I mean, this makes total sense of why they let the illegal immigrants in. Because if you're familiar with the live local law that they passed in Florida, they planned on building all of this subsidized housing all over Florida, give the developers a whole ton of money, right? That obviously are going to financially support them. And then they would be subsidized housing, taxpayer funded housing. Mm-hmm. And we would all be on the hook for that. And eventually we'd all be living in it because those would be the only houses we'd be able to afford because they would just keep on raising the taxes, squeezing everybody else out till you're living in one of those subsidized houses too.
It's disgusting when
it is.
We've dug into, and we've asked for forensic audits when we started digging into grants and other things and questioning,
as Rebecca said earlier, follow the money.
Oh, yeah.
That's all this is. Follow the money.
And they won't budge. They won't show it to you.
Yeah.
They won't.
That's further evidence that that's why they're rigging the elections. They want to make it look like, oh no, we're dumb. We don't or they'll make some stupid excuse. But in reality, it's to cover up a huge financial fraud.
You ask for transparency, they want to give you a bill of like $10,000.
Yeah.
Right? Like we did. I just asked for one contract from the school district. I asked for one, just one. I said I want an itemized list of all the spending and where it went. Right?
Yep.
Now it was a large contract. It was millions, but hey, you guys should have record of this.
Yeah.
It's your job. They wanted, what was it? It was like $10,000 or something insane.
In reality, it should be published to the website all the time so you could see it.
Right. I mean, where's the transparency? And like with the supervisor of elections, when you question an election, well, supervisor of elections, well, I got to pay staff to come in and do it, to go through and hand count each one. And that's a lot of people. And that's just going to cost a lot of money.
It never ceases to amaze me that I just got done doing some research online, especially with this Data Republican, that every nonprofit, every US citizen has all of their information online. Like you can figure out everything. You have their phone number, their address, you see everything that they get paid by that nonprofit. If they're in a company that's public, it's the same kind of thing. Their financials are open to the public. So, I mean, the only thing we're never allowed to see is what the government's doing. But God forbid you walk into the bank with a $600 to make a deposit. They're going to be like, well, where'd you get this from? Did your grandma give it to you? It's so stupid. The whole thing is if they were serious about election integrity and their words mattered and their words lined up with what they're promising, then they would be making the system more transparent and they would be asking for more citizens to participate. However that works out to be. Okay. But the fact is like I mentioned earlier, these laws are going to make us more like Georgia and Arizona, which are locked in a digital hell. And again, they'll just keep on raising taxes, hoping that they can blame it all on Trump. And like when this all comes, because it's going to be probably worse than what happened in 2008 when this all comes due. And essentially when that financial catastrophe happens, everybody will run to their TV to know who to blame. And they'll be like, Trump did it. Trump basically with his tariffs, he destroyed the whole economy, and they'll just try to blame it on him. And in 4 years, we're going to be in a situation that's probably going to make the years when we were under COVID look like Disneyland, because they'll know exactly who to come after and lock up to make sure that they don't get basically another Trump redo.
I mean, if you look at what happened with the special session with the Trump Act, right? People on X, I'm on X, were very vocal. Right. We spoke back the grassroots. We called it out for what it was. And I think the biggest problem I see is just locally and talking to people in other counties around Florida. They'll go and vote and then that's it. They don't file legislation. They don't play along. We didn't get to the position we are in locally. Your local, like you brought up property taxes, Kris. That's huge. It impacts everybody.
Exactly. That's my point. That's what should turn people around, because when they start seeing, I mean, we already can hear it from the insurance folks, people complaining about insurance, but property taxes, it even hits renters, because I'm seeing people crying on YouTube or in TikTok saying, I can't rent a house. And I got an 18-year-old. I feel for that situation. I mean, I slept in my car for a few months myself trying to find an apartment in Florida when I came here.
But everybody wants to pay attention to what the federal government's doing and Trump's doing, or, who's ever, it doesn't matter who's president. You need to pay your roads, your police, your fire, your schools, everything that impacts your day to day, your family, your kids. People, they're just showing up once every 2 years sometimes, right? They're not showing up in the primaries. The primary elections they were horrific across Florida. I think average, we were 20% was the average for all counties. We were 16% here in Pasco. Some were higher, some were actually lower than us. I was surprised. And then after we vote, we need to hold these people accountable. We need to echo our voices. We don't just represent you to be a king. You're supposed to represent our voices. And this is why we need to reach out to our legislators. And the problem is people weren't really emailing or calling them, right?
Yeah. But I mean, like the biggest thing I'm doing things like this right here is that I would rather spend my time telling normal citizens and normal Floridians than ever wasting my time sitting there arguing with Cord Bird or Ingoglia in his office. Like that's just like might as well bang my head with a hammer. The key here is waking up your neighbors because everybody is suffering this, and it literally is going to make a number of people homeless. One of the things that jumped out at us in the voter roll analysis was we kept on seeing these campgrounds with a bunch of people registering at campgrounds, and immediately people were thinking that was fraudulent. I actually drove to one of the local campgrounds here in Ocoee just to investigate because I was just curious. On one side of the street was a camper that was, or a retailer that was selling campers. There were people that were like just one step away from being homeless. They lost everything in 2008, and all the stuff that happened with COVID was just pushed them over the edge. They had to get a camper and plug in and get utilities because the next step was getting a tent because that's all they could afford. It broke my heart because I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, people are freaking out thinking that these are all fraudulent people, but these were real people getting registered at campgrounds because they were becoming homeless. And I'm telling you right now, if we don't do something about this and we let these people blame, because they will shift the blame. Their whole game here is change the law so nobody can argue about elections. Let's lock out people like Kris that he can't even do the analysis. Eventually, we'll shut off his access to the voter rolls. See no evil, hear no evil. These are the elections. Shut up, or we'll arrest you. And essentially, next thing you know, pay your tax or you're getting thrown out of your house. It's almost as if somebody was walking up behind you and throwing a bag over your head and suffocating you while nobody else is looking, because that's exactly what they hope. They hope to take each and every one of us out one by one. Nobody's able to organize with one another. Nobody's able to compete with this. But if 20% of the state stood up and said, oh, no, we're not playing this game anymore. This is our government. You guys were supposed to be you had a fiduciary responsibility to us. We trusted you to basically do the finances. And the whole point of this Constitution and everything we have is that you guys are supposed to watch over this. There's laws in the books to throw every single one of these corrupt bastards in jail for RICO, because that's what it is. This is literally like they got a gun to your head and they're saying, well, pay up or you lose your house. And unfortunately, a lot of people have already lost their house because of it. It's just that we've woken up to this now. That's the sad part.
Hey, Kris, are there any existing lawsuits that are going on statewide, or this is not just a Florida issue, obviously?
No, this guy just came to my attention like literally Sunday, and it was just I was just diving in and trying to go through his website. He has a website called Mockingbird Properties. I can send you the link. And I'm still going through it because he's got a wealth of information there, including all of the details of how to sue on this, because it's just math. You just have to prove that they've inflated the value of your home. He estimates that just about all of our houses have at least 40% overvalued, just so they can collect more taxes out of us. And it makes sense because, like, if you think about what's going on in the economy, you bought your house probably in a better financial situation if you bought before 2020, and now you're here, you would assume that home values would be going down, and they're not. They're going up. And you're thinking in your heart like, oh, wow, thank God, at least my house is doing well. But in reality, they're using it to rope you into a bond scheme that's going to basically bankrupt the entire country. This is really looking bad. I mean, the thing about the size of this one, it's way worse than 2008. 2008, people were in a pretty good financial situation. Right now, everybody's on credit card debt and basically barely getting by. Something like this, I don't know how we're going to recover from financially unless sane minds come to the table. A few people get arrested for doing what they did, and then the rest of the sane minds go through and say, okay, we're going to have to do haircuts. Like, people are going to, it's better to get 20% than zero. Like that, you got to basically, this is the same kind of stuff they do in businesses all the time.
Anything happening at a federal level that you know of?
No, I mean, supposedly he said that this was submitted to Bondi's Department of Justice, and everybody's screaming out for Doge because this is another big one for Doge to basically look into. But again, I personally think that we, the people, if we want to reestablish this contract that we have with the Constitution, ultimately it's our responsibility. Like, trusting the government to fix our problem is exactly why we're in this mess.
Right. We're the government. We're here to help.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for like you guys having these shows and people going out and doing the work, I completely get what you're saying, Rebecca, as far as basically people don't want to help, but it's the fact that people that do help that make a difference. Like when I was in New Jersey, it was nobody. Like nobody wanted to touch this. You'd probably get a brick through your wall if you even mentioned it to somebody at a dinner party. Corruption was not mentioned.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it's a big one. I mean, I hope people understand it because it gets complicated when it's into the all of this stuff. But I think using the analogy of like a murder mystery is the best way to think about it.
I like that analogy. And so, kind of what our next step to do is to kind of take the information you've given us and put it into a manageable, understandable, bite-size, pieces for people so they can easily digest it and understand it.
I would highly recommend using stuff that they see on a daily basis because I haven't met a person in Florida yet that hasn't told me that their county isn't basically being built to the hilt. Like they're just building left and right. And that's essentially feeding this. They have to build as many houses as possible to get as many people on the tax rolls to try and cover this debt because that's where the problem they're in. So they're thinking that they can essentially just build, and it will cover the debt. The problem is that every time you build, you add more expenses. You got to add police departments, schools, all this. It's like a never-ending loop. If these guys were smart, they never would have did this in the first place. So
yeah, but then they can hire their buddies, right?
Well, that's the whole thing.
And get the kickback.
Us against them. Because one of the biggest things that they're doing, especially with most of the legal, is it's like, well, if you do what you're told, you'll get your pension. If you don't, we'll make an example out of you. It's literally organized crime. Like I get chills to think about it like this. They're basically gangsters, what they're doing. But using stuff that people can relate to, sitting in traffic, their kids being overcrowded in schools, those are everyday issues that they can see. If you go on and start talking about legislation, their eyes will glass over. You got to explain to them the why first. And once you hook them with the why, then they'll want to be more involved and do the things that they have to do.
Okay, let's go back to just as a recap. So we need to contact people about HB 1381 and SB 1414. And why we need to know about this is it's going to take your vote away, basically, so you won't have the opportunity to look at things in the future. And so if you care about your voice and who gets elected, you need to do something about this. And you need to contact your county commissioners, look and track when the bill is happening, call your Senate office, call your House Representative office, and let them know that you disagree with all of these things. Make your voice known some way, because not all of us have the time to do this. But if you care about what your vote says, you probably want to look into it. Any voice is an important voice. So social media is also a good thing. All those things, you need to contact them about that. And if not, it could end up taking your property and you might not be able to get your stuff back. We're verging on losing everything. And that's how much this stuff matters.
And I mean, the one thing that I basically jump out of bed every morning, I because of what happened to my wife's family in Venezuela, I literally got visited by the ghost of Christmas future. And I just saw my kids like emancipated. And now I got an 18-year-old and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, where is he going to go to get a job? How's he going to get his first place? How's he going to settle down? Like these kind of things, people might be like, whatever, I paid into the system. That's your problem. And I've even told that to my parents because they're like, well, it's your problem now. And it's like, thank you very much. Like, I think a lot of the problems we have right now, these are the boomers were like, whatever, see you guys later.
It really is up to us for our kids and our grandkids. I mean, we may not even realize, the impacts of our actions right now. We may not.
Yeah. But I also have a story of my great grandfather surviving World War II. And like the amount of work and effort, he came to this country with nothing. He literally rode a bicycle from Philadelphia to New Jersey and cut wood with his bare hands and then cleared acres to sell. And then ultimately he sold enough real estate to bring his family over and build a farm. Like, and if it wasn't for him doing that, he started that when he was 55 years old. And he started doing that when he was 55. And I think, like, my God, he did all of that so I now can live like this instead of having to survive Russian communism in Poland at the time. So, I mean, I think the same thing now is like we really have a duty to do this because ultimately I don't know what's going to happen if we sit down. There's nowhere on this planet our kids are going to be able to escape to. Nowhere. This will be the end. This will be the last place in the whole world that they're ever going to have any kind of freedom. Because they're going to clamp down this on the whole world. 15-minute cities, you will own nothing, and you will be happy.
Kris, can you go ahead and tell people, how they can get involved with your group, what in your website?
Sure. Thepeoplesaudit.org, all one word, thepeoplesaudit.org. That's probably the best place to start. There's links there to my Substack. My Telegram is mostly, I post a lot to Telegram. I just started adding more things to Twitter X. And I also every once in a while put things to Substack, longer forms, some videos, things like that. We're going to be trying to do more training because the thing is I've been running back and forth between Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, and trying to help. The other thing is like the work in Georgia really helped me spot the problems that we have here because essentially they're trying to turn us into Georgia as far as their elections go. So that's the hardest thing for me now is to basically spread that knowledge out. We're going to try and do some more training. I've been promising people that forever, but this year specifically is where we're going to start putting up some more classes to get people involved. The big thing I think is local action. It's just getting to know your local politics and networking and building communities and relationships in your own backyard, getting together with like-minded people. Because no matter whatever is going to come at us, we need that community to stick together. I coming from a hermit, trust me, I already ran out. I had a farm with 17 acres in the middle of nowhere, and that's not going to save you. So you gotta basically reach out to people and basically start building networks and start working with your people in your backyard, and then use those people to come in and start sitting down. Because one person comes into an office, it really doesn't mean much, but 10 people, 15, 30, 100 people, and then they start paying attention.
Thank you very much.
Kris, where would you recommend that we go to follow the bill?
Best thing to do for anything legislative would be go to defendflorida.org.
Defend Florida does have amazing stuff. I agree.
And they also have some weekly calls that you can sign up from the website to get more involved with the legislation and things like that. But those are more technical. They're going to be talking about like who to talk to, what's going on with the legislation, the negotiation of the legislation. But I highly recommend if you're a business professional, it's probably like a typical meeting but it's a little bit more advanced. Or at the very least, sign up for their newsletter and get all the alerts.
If somebody wants to reach out to you, are you okay with that?
My website's always available. There's a contact form. That's the easiest way to reach out to me. I can't promise I'm Johnny on the spot to respond in an instant, but I usually wind up getting back to emails within a couple days.
I mean, what a great amount of information. Thank you so much, Kris, for being able to be here. And I hope that this has educated all of you enough to make you want to go do something to fight for your vote. I mean, just that story about your dad, that's incredible. Like thinking about doing all of that at 55, it's quite something. But we all have a voice. We all can do something. And that's why, because this is extremely important for all of us to do something. This is for our future. This is for our kids. This is for our property. This is for everything we've been working for so many years.
Kris, keep us posted on those bills, any additional bills that might be coming.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. And let's make Pulse Pasco something that really makes a change. Let's work together. If you have questions for us at Pulse Pasco, please contact us on Facebook, or you can contact us through the email we have below. So thank you, everybody, for being here, and we appreciate it. Have a great night.